Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. Today we are talking about something that everyone most likely uses every day. No, we are not talking about the soft touch of your favorite branded toilet paper. We are talking about USB. Almost all of our electronics these days are powered through USB connections, but not all that long ago, it wasn't like that at all. Before 1996, USB didn't exist, and computers had to use serial and parallel ports that came in all different shapes and sizes. Lots of old computers had a combination of these, and they had separate connections for the mouse and keyboard as well. And a lot of those connectors would be bulky and fragile, with physical pins on each connection. Not only were these connections a huge pain, but if you wanted to plug something in and the connector you needed was already in use, you couldn't just swap them out like you can now. You'd have to shut down your computer, swap them out, and start everything up again. And for anyone who remembers how long it took to restart some of those old computers, it was like watching paint dry. Enter Universal Serial Bus, or USB, which was invented in 1996 to address all these issues, giving you the ability to connect a variety of devices without needing a bunch of cords and connectors. USB made it a lot easier to connect to computers. It had a simplified software configuration for any of the devices using it, gave us faster transfer speeds, and improved usability. It's easy to overlook the simplicity of the connector design, but that's one of the things that makes it so amazing. With USB, there was no longer pins on any of the connectors, so we no longer had to worry about bending pins on the connectors. The connections were just contact-based, which overall were a lot more durable and reliable than a parallel port or serial port. When connecting USB, the outside of the connector is the piece that connects or touches first, which dissipates any electric shock, which ultimately protects the electronics that are being connected. Next, the internal pins touch, with the power and the ground making a connection first, followed by the data connections. And once a connection is made, the computer recognizes the device, assigns it an address, and installs a driver if there's not one already installed. This process is all automated now for the most part, which didn't always used to be the case. Lots of us probably are familiar with having to install device drivers off of a CD, and if you lost the CD, you were like,
oh, let me get on the World Wide Web and try and find the right driver.
Luckily, we don't have to do that anymore. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Your computer finds out what class and type of device you're using, things like hard drives, USB hubs, keyboards, mice, and so on. It also reads the transfer speed of the device and can supply power to it. Again, a lot of this stuff is variable depending on what version of USB you have, and there's a lot of different USB versions, most of which have been super confusing in the past few years, so let's just decompress that a little bit. USB 1.0 was introduced in 1996, which at this stage was only used to connect a mouse and a keyboard to a computer. The transfer rate was only 1.5 megabits per second to a maximum of 12 megabits per second, which is only equal to 1.5 megabytes per second, which still at this time was a lot of storage. It wasn't until 1998, when USB 1.1 came out, that we started to see it become a little bit more widely adopted. And the Apple iMac actually became the first USB-only computer. USB 1.1 still ran at 12 megabits per second, and it only had Type A and Type B connections. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Type A connections, as we still do see this connector a lot on chargers and different devices. And you may have seen Type B on something like a printer, but It's pretty uncommon these days. Following USB 1.1, USB 2.0 appeared a few years later in 2000 with a huge jump in speed at 480 megabits per second, which is 40 times faster than the previous generation. To this day, it's still a lot faster than most people's Wi-Fi speeds, and it had a greater adoption than USB 1.1, and it was still backwards compatible with USB 1.1 devices. We also saw USB 2 released with a bunch of different connector options, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen these before. As our electronics started to get smaller and more portable, having a bigger connector would have made it pretty awkward to plug in. These smaller plugs started to show up on things like portable drive storage, and much later on cell phones, and it was actually one of the main factors in killing off the floppy disk drive, zip drives, and eventually killing off CD-ROM drives. In 2008, USB 3.0 was introduced featuring super speed with a maximum transfer speed of 5 gigabits per second, or around 625 megabytes per second, which was much faster than the previous generation. USB 3.0 is still widely used today, and I'd say it's probably at this stage the most common with things like USB hubs and flash drives and external drives. Again, it's still backwards compatible with USB 2 and 1, and it's signified in most cases with a blue cable or connector identifier, where USB 2 was black and USB 1 was white. USB 3 had actually gone back in terms of cable design with just a few options available. This would eventually be expanded upon in 2013 with USB 3.1, and this is where USB versioning starts to get a little bit weird, which I will touch on in a minute. The speeds for USB 3.1 doubled to a max of 10 gigabits per second, which at this point was over 800 times faster than the first USB release. Shortly after the release of USB 3.1, a new connection, USB Type-C, showed up. This new design was a small oval style and was the first reversible connection, meaning there was no wrong way to plug it in. USB 3.1 was also able to handle power at 20 volts and 5 amps, and this was a huge jump with the previous capability of only 5 volts and 1.8 amps, and that led to a rise of a whole bunch of new fast charging devices, and also started to meet the needs of more power-hungry machines like laptops. So coming back to what I was saying before about weird versioning, USB 3.1 was a bit weird in the fact that there were two different types. There was USB 3.1 Gen 1, which had a max transfer speed of 5 gigabits per second, and USB 3.1 Gen 2, which had a max transfer speed of 10 gigabits per second. And this was kind of confusing, and in an effort to make this less confusing, which really only made things worse, USB 3.1 was then changed to USB 3.2, which now had 3 different speeds associated with it. Gen 1, which was 5 gigabits per second, Gen 2, which was 10, and Gen 2 by 2, which came in at 20 gigabits per second. So, you'll often notice that on product information, manufacturers will spec out pretty much anything between 3.0 and 3.2, and this could essentially mean something different depending on the version that they're referring to. So just a helpful tip if you are looking for something like a USB hub or a portable SSD, pay less attention to the USB versioning and more attention to the transfer speed itself. Hopefully all the USB 3 versioning is something in the past that we won't have to worry about in future releases. We did get a bump to USB 4 recently, which was announced in 2019. Not a ton of devices support USB 4 yet, but if you've got a Mac with an M1 processor, your machine actually does have USB 4. It's capable of 40 gigabits per second transfer speed, and it can also support up to 8K resolution monitors at 60 Hz, and it only uses the Type-C connection. Apparently the people who make the USB standards must have caught on to just how confusing the previous generation was for versioning and packaging, because this time around they opted not to include version numbers on the packaging, but they just used transfer speeds instead, which I think makes a lot more sense, especially with version iterations coming in at shorter time intervals. It will be pretty interesting to see where this tech goes from here. The rate that it has improved has been crazy, with transfer speeds going 3,200 times faster than they were 25 years ago when USB was first released. It's so easy to take for granted just how much of a difference something like a connector and communication protocol has in our everyday lives. I can almost guarantee that everyone that's watching this video has something with a USB connection. Probably whatever you're watching this on right now has one. And as we do move to a future that probably looks a little bit more wireless, it'll be interesting to see if USB stays as the industry standard for all our electronics, or if we'll move on to something else. Now, I'm curious to know what you guys think, what the future will look like. Will we still be using USB like we are now 10 years from now? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed this little history lesson, please give me a thumbs up. It really does help me out and it makes a difference on this channel. If you want to see more tech-related content, please subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.